Every time you speak, and I mean literally every time, you are actively spreading a prehistoric virus.
Yeah, it's a pretty unsettling thought when you actually stop to process it.
Right. So think about the voice inside your head right now. The one narrating this sentence, or maybe running through your to-do list for the day, or just forming an opinion about what you're hearing.
We usually consider that inner monologue to be like the absolute core of who we are.
Exactly. The most human part of you. But what if that voice, what if language itself isn't a tool that humanity invented at all?
That is the big question.
What if it's actually a highly evolved non-biological pathogen, like something that successfully infected our ancestors 100,000 years ago, and we've just been living with the symptoms ever since?
I mean, it forces a complete reassessment of human consciousness. Because when you stop looking at language as a creation of the human mind and you start looking at it as an autonomous entity that colonized us.
Oh, colonized.
Yeah, literally colonized the human mind. The hierarchy of who is actually in control gets very blurry very quickly.
And that inversion of control is the exact premise of today's deep dive. We're looking at a stack of incredibly provocative research today, anchored by a 2026 Substack article.
Right, from a researcher writing under the name SpiralSeekr.
Yes, SpiralSeekr. And the piece is titled Language as a Cognitive Infection. So our mission today is to take you through this crazy intersection of memetics, neurobiology, and evolutionary linguistics.
Really trying to figure out if the words you use are actually using you.
Right. So to even understand the sheer scale of the paradigm shift SpiralSeekr is proposing here, we kind of have to look at the classical view of language first.
We do, because traditionally we put language on this massive pedestal.
Oh, for sure. It's the ultimate human invention.
Exactly. It's framed as the crowning achievement of a hyper-intelligent primate. The standard narrative is always, well, early humans needed to hunt large prey, or we needed to build complex social structures to survive.
So we consciously engineered a tool called language to facilitate that.
Right, to cooperate.
It's kind of like a hammer, you know?
Yeah.
In the traditional view, humans invented the hammer to build things. We had a problem, we invented a solution, and we deploy it whenever we need it. It's totally subservient to us.
That is the traditional consensus, yeah. But SpiralSeekr applies a cybernetic lens to this entire history.
Okay, cybernetics, remind me.
So cybernetics is essentially the study of how systems regulate themselves through feedback loops and information flow.
Okay.
And when you view human history through that specific lens, the whole invention narrative just sort of falls apart.
Wait, what?
Because language doesn't behave like a tool that a species actively controls. It behaves exactly like a highly adaptive informational virus, one that systematically found a host, the primate brain, and hijacked its architecture.
Okay, I think we need to slow down and unpack the mechanics of that, because calling an idea, or, a string of words, a virus sounds like a metaphor.
It does sound like a metaphor, but
Right? Because we know what biological viruses look like. They have genetic material, they have protein codes, they physically invade human cells. How does a non-biological concept actually function as a pathogen?
well, it requires us to strip away the biological bias of what a virus is and just look at the underlying mathematical function.
Okay.
At its core, a virus is really just a package of code. It's a set of instructions that has one singular directive, which is to replicate and spread.
Just copy itself at all costs.
Exactly. A biological virus uses DNA or RNA as its code, and it hijacks the physical machinery of a cell to do that copying. But an informational virus, which falls under the study of memetics, uses syntax, vocabulary, and grammatical rules as its code.
Oh, wow. So it doesn't need a physical body.
No, because it hijacks a completely different kind of machinery. It hijacks the cognitive processing power of the human brain.
Okay, if I'm tracking this, it's really not a metaphor.
Yeah.
It is a literal software virus operating on our biological hardware.
That is exactly what it is.
To put it in a more visceral way, it makes me think about the Cordyceps fungus. You know the one?
Yeah, the zombie ant fungus.
Yes. It infects the nervous system of an ant, physically rewires the ant's neural pathways, and then forces the ant to climb to the top of a high stalk just so the fungus can burst out and spread its spores.
It's terrifying.
It is. And the ant probably thinks it's making a conscious choice to climb that stalk.
Yeah.
But the parasite is driving the vehicle.
A Cordyceps analogy is deeply unsettling, but mathematically, it maps perfectly to what SpiralSeekr is arguing about language.
Really?
Yeah. Think about it. The linguistic virus needed a way to jump from host to host, so it hijacked the human respiratory system to push air through the vocal cords, and it co-opted Broca's area in the brain to structure those sounds.
So you think you are choosing to speak?
But from a cybernetic perspective, the viral code is just executing a replication routine.
Man, that is a lot. But if that is true, if language is a separate, autonomous virus actively adapting to our biological hardware, then this shouldn't just be a philosophical thought experiment. We should be able to see the footprints of this pathogen, right? Like mutating over history.
Yes, and we can. The article actually points to a massive 2026 phylogenetic study as the physical proof of this.
Okay, a phylogenetic study. I usually hear that word associated with evolutionary biology, like genetics and stuff.
It is the exact same methodology, just applied to information instead of genes.
Okay, so how do they do it with language?
They built a massive evolutionary family tree. Researchers took the grammatical rules, sentence structures, and phonetics of over 1,700 distinct human languages.
Wow, 1,700.
Yeah, huge sample size.
Right.
And they used advanced computational modeling to trace their mutations back thousands of years. They were basically looking at how the code of the virus changed as it passed from generation to generation.
Wait, let me push back on this for a second, because if I have one ancient culture completely isolated in, say, the dense Amazon rainforest, right?
Okay.
And another ancient culture completely isolated in the freezing tundra of Siberia, shouldn't their languages have evolved to be structurally chaotic and totally different from each other?
That's what you would think, yeah.
Because their daily survival needs, their environments, the literal things they need to talk about are completely different.
You would logically expect massive structural divergence if language were just a cultural artifact, like different styles of pottery or clothing built to suit local environments.
Right.
But that is not what the phylogenetic data revealed at all. The researchers discovered that language mutation is not random, and it is not primarily driven by environmental factors.
Wait, really? Then what is driving it?
Well, even in completely isolated geographical ecosystems with zero contact, syntactic structures and word orders continuously evolve toward highly predictable, mathematically identical patterns.
Mathematically identical. But if the environments outside are completely different, why is the code mutating in the exact same direction?
Oh.
What? Oh, I think I get it. The environment outside the human skull doesn't matter to the virus.
Exactly.
The environment inside the skull is what matters. The linguistic pathogen is trying to hack the exact same proprietary hardware, the human cortex.
You nailed it. The reason the grammar of an isolated Amazonian tribe and an isolated Siberian tribe begin to mirror each other mathematically is because every variant of this virus is ruthlessly optimizing itself to fit the pre-existing neurobiological contours of the human brain.
That is mind-blowing. But how does that optimization actually work in practice?
Yeah.
Like, what is the mechanism that forces a grammar rule to change just because of a brain contour?
It comes down to cognitive caloric energy.
Energy, like calories.
Yeah, the human brain is an incredibly energy-hungry organ. It consumes about 20% of the body's total calories. So imagine a variant of the language virus that requires too much computational effort to process. Say, a hyper-complex sentence structure with completely unpredictable verb placements.
Right, that would be exhausting to think about.
Exactly. It burns too much energy. The host brain will naturally resist it, misremember it, or just simplify it over time.
So over millennia, the viral code naturally flows down the path of least neurological resistance.
Precisely. It drops inefficient rules and adopts structures that naturally align with how our neurons already fire. The virus literally shapes its grammar to fit perfectly into the grooves of our neural pathways to ensure maximum infectivity.
So it's not that humans are brilliant inventors of efficient language. It's that inefficient language variants died off because our brains couldn't sustain them. The virus adapted to us.
Yes, and this leads to the most critical part of SpiralSeekr's argument.
Which is?
Well, we've established how the virus installs itself by matching our biological hardware. But the next question is, what happens to the host once this highly optimized linguistic operating system is fully up and running?
Okay, so this moves us from the biology of the infection to the actual psychological reality of living with it.
Right. And SpiralSeekr roots this heavily in a concept called the Sapir-Whorf Hypothesis.
Also known as linguistic relativity, right?
Exactly. Linguistic relativity proposes that the specific language you speak physically dictates the parameters of your cognition.
So to speak a language isn't just to make different vocal sounds.
No, it is to run a specific software operating system that actively routes how your neurons parallel process information.
The outline of the article gave a fascinating example of this regarding time. Can we look at that mechanism? Because that really broke my brain.
Oh, the temporal dynamics example is perfect. So in English, the viral code demands rigid temporal buckets. We have past, present, and future tense.
Right, like I walked, I am walking, I will walk.
Exactly. If I am talking about an action, the syntax forces me to neurologically categorize whether it has happened, is happening, or will happen. The linguistic software forces my brain to physically compartmentalize reality.
But there are cultures where the language virus never evolved a future tense verb structure.
Correct. And in civilizations where grammatical syntax lacks those future tense structures, the speakers do not possess the same neurological compartmentalization between now and the future.
Wait, so how do they perceive time?
Without those syntactic buckets, they do not view time as a segmented timeline. Structurally, their brains model time as an immediate ongoing continuum.
So for you and me, when I say I will go to the store tomorrow, I am not just passively describing my plans. The English linguistic operating system is actively forcing my neurons to physically separate today from tomorrow.
Yes, it is creating a boundary in your reality that doesn't objectively exist in the universe.
Wow.
This is the absolute crux of the causality problem. We walk around assuming that we perceive a neutral, objective universe, and then we just use words to describe what we see.
But SpiralSeekr is arguing the exact opposite.
Completely the opposite. We are not passively describing the universe. The linguistic virus uses grammar to dictate the very parameters of what we are biologically capable of perceiving. Your perception is strictly bounded by the arbitrary rules of your native tongue.
So if the operating system doesn't have the syntax to support a concept, I literally cannot think the thought.
I can't.
My neurons are being forced down very specific roads, and entire highways of reality are just blocked off to me simply because my virus didn't evolve the code for them.
Which brings us to the concept SpiralSeekr calls the topological prison.
The topological prison. That phrase is incredibly evocative because topology is about the geometric properties of space, right?
Right.
So we're basically trapped in the geometry of our own grammar. It reminds me of the idea of being born wearing a highly advanced virtual reality headset.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, imagine the headset is surgically fused to you. It actually is your mind. You walk around in this VR world, and you can only see the colors, the shapes, and the concepts that the headset software has been programmed to render.
And the true strength of that analogy lies in the absolute ignorance of the user. Because the true nature of a topological prison is that you don't know there are walls.
You just assume the colors the headset renders are all the colors that exist in the objective universe.
Exactly. If the headset lacks the code to render ultraviolet light, ultraviolet simply does not exist in your reality.
So SpiralSeekr's ultimate question here is about objective truth. Can human consciousness ever break out of the headset? Like, can we ever experience a truly objective reality, or are we forever locked inside the localized geometry of our native tongue?
The research heavily implies that we are permanently locked in.
Man.
I know. If a fundamental truth about the universe, say, something concerning higher dimensions or the true nature of quantum mechanics, if that truth requires a grammatical structure or a method of temporal processing that our language virus just hasn't evolved, we are biologically blind to it.
So we might be staring directly at the answers to the universe, but because we lack the underlying syntax to compute the data, it just remains invisible?
We can't think outside the virus because the virus is what we used to think.
Okay, let's take a breath and sort of synthesize this whole journey.
Mm.
Because we started with this comfortable classical view of language as a simple tool, a hammer we invented to help us hunt and build.
Right.
But by examining the intersection of memetics and that phylogenetic tracking of 1,700 languages, that illusion just falls away.
Mm.
The data suggests that language is a highly optimized, ancient cognitive infection.
A virus that successfully colonized the hardware of the human cortex.
Yeah, by slowing down the path of least neurological resistance. And now it serves as the master operating system for our perception. It dictates everything from our spatial awareness to our neurocomputational model of time, basically trapping us in a topological prison of its own design.
It is a radical reframing of what it means to be human, but, if we follow this trajectory forward, there is an incredibly pressing implication that SpiralSeekr's work hints at.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, if this linguistic virus has spent the last 100,000 years perfectly optimizing itself for the proprietary hardware of the biological human cortex, what happens to the virus right now?
Right now. Like in modern times.
I mean, right now, as we begin to heavily interface our minds with artificial intelligence.
Oh, wow.
Think about it. We are currently introducing neural links, brain-computer interfaces, and large language models directly into our cognitive processing streams. The environment of the host is radically changing.
Silicon is being introduced to the biological hardware.
Exactly. That is a staggering variable to throw into the mix. If an LLM operates on a fundamentally non-human syntax, a mathematical code optimized for a massive server farm, not a human cortex, what happens when that code interfaces with our brains?
That is the ultimate question. Like, will our ancient biological language virus simply adapt, jump the barrier, and colonize the machine architecture?
Or, far more terrifyingly, will the AI's non-human syntax infect us?
If we internalize the operating system of a machine, it will physically rewrite our neural pathways to match its code.
It will build an entirely different alien reality for us to inhabit. We might just be trading one topological prison for another.
Does the virus infect the AI, or does the machine's virus infect us? That thought is going to fundamentally change how I interact with literally every piece of technology today.
It's a lot to process.
It really is. Well, thank you for walking through this incredibly dense and paradigm-shifting material with me.
My pleasure.
And to you, listening, I encourage you to do one thing as you go about the rest of your day. Pay very close attention to the shape of your thoughts. The next time you find yourself planning for tomorrow, or analyzing a problem, or just listening to that inner monologue narrating your commute, pause and ask yourself, is that you talking? Or is it the infection?